All right. Well, thank you very much for your time then. And I'll go ahead and get started with the demo. First off, kind of some stuff to kind of go over about MSP Toolshed and what it's all about and what it includes. So as you said, you're looking for something that's going to help you with deploying of computers. Well, that's exactly what we're going for, and we're kind of looking for, in particular, two main scenarios that we're going to be working with. One of them is computers that are new out of box. They're still prior to the out of box experience being run through. And then you're going to have your existing computers that have already been through the out of box experience. Either A, it's a remote user that's bringing on their own device, or maybe it's a new client that you're bringing on for the first time. All right,
Hmm.
so like you may want to get them onboarded throughout all their different with all of your different items that you need to perform on their computers after the fact. Now, the way we do a lot of our deployments is using what's called a Windows service. We call it the Easy Deploy service, and we install it temporarily on the machine to perform the actions within the configuration profile you're going to create. The configuration profile at its core is basically all the stuff you want it to perform, be it software installs, configuration changes, a PowerShell script for some reason or other, all the different items that you want it to change and do on the machines during this deployment, during these scenarios. So like I said, Windows service temporarily installs, does all the actions in the configuration profile, and then it removes itself. So that's kind of the core root of how MSP Toolshed works. Now, we deliver that service in two different methods. Okay, and one's going to be called one-touch deployments, which is your prior to the out-of-box experience, and then your web start deployments, which is your after the out-of-box experience. Now, there's
Okay.
other things you can do along with this is you can rename the computers using naming rules. There's custom installers you can utilize if you don't have like find something within our package of installation methods. And then also you have the ability to potentially use installation PowerShell scripts for whatever purposes you need. But let's go ahead and get into configuration profiles because like I said, this is the probably the root of everything, the meat and potatoes of what we're going to be doing within Toolshed to get everything started. Now, I've got a few profiles that I've kind of created, but I'm going to start off with this base profile first. And the reason why I'm touching base on this one is we have the ability to nest profiles within profiles. So, like for example, you're going to have several different clients as an MSP, and
Hmm.
you're going to want to probably have different things between each of those different profiles. So each of those clients. So what we can do is we can create one base profile which covers the generic stuff that you're going to apply to everybody, and then you can
Hmm.
have your client specific profiles with the base profile um, nested in so that you can have more specific items to the client. Like maybe you have a specific way you're going to rename those clients, or maybe you have certain software that you need to have installed, or configuration changes, or a different time zone, whatever it is, you can change those up if necessary. So let's go over the profile here and some of the options that are available. Course, name, description, kind of straightforward there. We have the options, install all available Windows build updates. This does install all Windows updates as if you were running the Windows updates check for updates over and over again. This does
Okay.
install build updates. This does still install optional updates. It installs everything. All right. Now, if you have anything where, in case of, for example, you're using Automate or if you're other RMM, um, if you have certain restrictions on what updates you can push, we tend to not recommend using this and use your RMM to get the initial updates pushed out there because you might have certain things blocked or not wanted installed.
Okay.
But at this point, though, a lot of clients, they like to just have a nice base. Hey, this thing's fully freshly started, and it's going to go from there. Power off when finished, pretty straightforward. When the actual deployment is done, it powers off the computer. Great way to know that something's been done. I'm going to come back to naming rules when we go to client specific stuff, but that's where you'd set up the naming rules if you're going to have it rename the computer. Build notification. This is simply notifying an end user or someone that is trying to log into the machine while it's running that, hey, Toolshed's doing something. Now, this is configurable, this is changeable, but this is what we do is we hijack the confidential notice screen when you go to log in. This is where
Hmm.
this is going to show up. Now, we remove this after the fact, just like we remove the service too. Power settings. These are the power settings that are going to be left behind on the machine once the deployment finishes. Case in point, you can have it so that, like, for example, I can set these to 0 if I need to. to disable these particular items if I want, but just understand that this is what's going to be left behind. We do disable power settings during the deployment, so it doesn't interrupt the deployment.
Okay.
All right, but just keep in mind this is what's left behind. Now, if you have other changes you want to make, like for example, on lid open, on lid close, you can do that via different configuration profile items in that. Okay, like say for example, you can have your own PowerShell script you have written up that you could use to change your own settings if you want. That's a very useful, good reason to utilize the PowerShell script feature, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Now, within this, probably the meat and potatoes is the profile items. This is all the stuff that Toolshed can do. Okay. Of course, I'm in a live demo. There it goes. Never mind. So all the different types of items that we can do within the profile. The major ones are Chocolatey installs. Are you familiar with chocolatey.org?
I know what it is. I've never used it though.
Okay. It's a package management application. So you would install Chocolatey on your computer and you would type in Choco space install space Google Chrome or whatever the ID is for the application. And it would go in, download Chrome, install it, and then finish. And it does it all silent. So what this allows me to do is to go into an entire library of applications. Like for example, I already have Chrome being installed, but like AdGuard and all kinds of other things, extensions and stuff for Chrome are in here. But at the same time, Adobe Acrobat Reader's already in this list, but you could see there's a bunch of different Adobe products and whatnot available too to install. So we're just utilizing this package management tool to perform an installation. I'm going to come back to custom installers, but then there is MSP Toolshed scripts. This is the next one. These are our native scripts. This is essentially our own PowerShell scripts that we've created. You'll see that there's a bunch of different ones, like for example, for removing or disabling Cortana, a lot of configuration item changes, disabling UAC, changing time zones, installations. We do have a few installations in here, for example, for Manage or Chrome, things like that. We do also have Office in there. These tend to work really well. I've never seen anybody complain about these, especially if you're using Business or Pro Plus, depending on your licensing. And then also we have a few other items, like for example, SonicWall, which I'm going to touch base on SonicWall real quick here because we do also have the ability, like this SonicWall Net Extender is a VPN client. Well, we don't necessarily need this on desktops. I have the ability to change between laptops and desktops right here. So in this case, if I wanted to add this item to this list, but only have it applied to laptops, I could do so. At the same time, if you're doing some type of installation that you know is going to require a reboot, I can add a reboot to this also. And as you can see here, adds it down to the bottom of the list. And there we go. Reboot applies to right there available. Same point, I can move the order around of any of these items. Sometimes you may find that you need to have certain things run prior to, and to go from there. Next item on here is the ability to nest. I'll come back to that one here in a moment. And then we have RMM scripts, which in this case, RMM scripts is because I have the integration set up with ConnectWise Automate. This allows me to access all of my ConnectWise Automate scripts. Okay. Tons of scripts that are available in here. All of them that I've got. If you've got a bunch you've written up that you already use within Automate, you can tie those in right here. Great thing about that is it allows you for some more advanced customizations. So I know within Automate, you have all of your extra data fields and things like that you can work with, which can be relatively useful, especially during deployments.
Yeah.
That's kind of it for those items. Like I said, I'm going to come back to PowerShell, Nest, and Custom. We'll touch base on those ones, but they're just additional items you can add in. Custom and PowerShell are your own library. You would have your own stuff that you can create. I'm going to show those off kind of near the end. Any questions here so far?
Do you have the ability to distinguish between servers and workstations?
I do not. We tend to. We primarily just do laptop and desktops because we're mainly targeted at workstation deployments.
Okay.
Now, you could technically set up a profile that's specific to servers if you want to and use it for servers. There's not a problem with that. We haven't had anybody have problems with that, but it tend to be most people need to deploy 10, 50, 20, 30, whatever computers they're working with. And that's where kind of MSP Toolshed kind of comes in and where it really shines. But if
Okay.
you want to, but if you want to use it for a server, you can. It's not a problem. I would just make sure that it will just make sure to always use applies to all. But I'm pretty certain servers always default to desktop is what it looks like to them. But if you set it to all, it doesn't matter. It'll
Okay.
always default to installations for you. Um, but yeah, good question though. Next thing I want to show off is how it looks like when it's nested. So like I was mentioning, you can see here the base profile is now nested within Duff Beer here.
Mm-hmm.
And we're using kind of like my base profile. And then I have my client specific items, for example, Fox Reader. And then like I have an MSP tool scripts for Office Pro Plus being installed. Now, the other thing that I can do, which I mean, you tend to do with client specific is I can apply a naming rule to this. Well, I have one called Duff Beer here. You can also just hit the plus symbol and create a new one, which I'm going to go ahead and do. And let's go ahead and just create ourselves one. And let's say, for example, my company's is like company ABC. And I
Mm-hmm.
want to have ABC TAC as my beginning text designation. I can
Mm-hmm.
do that there. I can differentiate between chassis if I want to, laptop and desktop. Add that into my naming format.
Mm-hmm.
Once again, you can also move these things around as you see fit. And then lastly, I need something unique. Well, there's two different things we have in here for more unique situations. Use serial number, which, I mean, remember we do have a 15 character limit, so we have to understand that if it's a serial number that's larger than like at 15 characters, for example, I think it's Microsoft Surfaces, that may not work because it's going to
Yeah.
truncate and it may mess up the number. But
Right.
that is also an option there. And then we also have the ability to do accounting functionality. Now, with Automate, our counting functionality is a little more advanced because the nice thing of this is we can check against Automate if a name exists.
Okay.
So we can choose a client and or location, or sorry, a client or sorry, I can choose a client and location or just client, one of the two,
Okay.
that I can have something specific to what I'm looking for. So I know some clients like to do location specific naming conventions. You could do that and then have it check the location also for what we're looking for. At this point here, though, with the way I have it set up, it's only going to check the client. All right. And then I'm going to have a
Okay.
starting number. Let's say for example, my starting number is 50. Now I can do fixed length number if I want to. And in this case, I can do between 2, 3, and 4 characters. What's going to happen here is it's going to count and it's going to add a 0 because it's fixed length of 3. And in my case, my starting number will actually be 050.
Okay.
So now what this is going to do is it's going to check against my client to see, does this computer name with this number exist, 050? If it does, it moves on to the next number. If it doesn't, it uses the number that it's there. So,
Okay.
and that makes it relatively easy to add in a numerical organization if you want to. Now, I do tend to recommend that if you're utilizing a client that already has a starting number of some sort, maybe do like 100 or maybe 500, depending on what it is, the situation is. And you can always do something. It's all situational, of course, but you can pick whatever number you like for your starting number and work up
Mm-hmm.
from there. What's cool about also is that it will fill in the blanks.
Oh, good. Yeah.
All right. So if you ever have a chance where you need to go back and fill in, what you can do is like if I submit this right here, and I'm going to come out and come back into the naming rules and like let's say, oh, I need to edit this one, and I kind of want to have my counting function start from scratch. Clear existing naming rule count.
Mm.
So it'll go back to my starting number. I mean, you can modify it to 1 if you wanted to, and what it'll do is it'll fill in the blanks. Now, just understand that this doesn't check against ADE and like that. It just checks against what's in Automate. So if you've got an agent, if you've got a computer out there that doesn't have an Automate agent on it, it may not work properly. So kind of keep that in
Mm.
mind.
Okay. Yeah.
But that's one benefit of having the Automate integration is it can fill in the blanks. Without the automated integration, it just counts up a number. Okay, it doesn't check it. It checks only against what's deployed and via Toolshed. So it will count up from there. Now, in this case, Duff Beer is all set up, ready to go. I've got it set up with my naming rules. I've got it set up with my power settings, my profile items, all that kind of thing. I can now start setting up for deployments. Typically, in most cases, I like to tell clients when they're working with Toolshed, most of the time, setting up your configuration profiles and getting those fine-tuned in and what you're on is probably the most majority of the time you're going to take within Toolshed and getting it set up.
Mm-hmm.
Once you're ready, you can now start doing deployments. Deployments is where we have our two scenarios. The first one we're going to talk about is one-touch deployments. This is for your new out-of-box computers. Okay. Let's say, for example, you've got 5 computers that one of your techs going to need to set up at a workbench. Well, this is the scenario exactly for that. How we do it is we use what's called a Windows provisioning package. Are you familiar with Windows provisioning packages at all?
No.
All right, Windows provisioning package is a tool that you can utilize with the out-of-box experience. It is a Windows PPKG file. Provisioning package can be placed on a FAT32-bit thumb drive. Okay, root of the thumb
Okay.
drive, and at the region select screen. All right, actually, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's go ahead and create the deployment first, and I'll actually show you how it works.
Okay.
So let's take this Duff test one here, for example. I've taken Duff Beer's configuration profile, and I'm attaching it to this deployment. I have my client and location, so the automate agent can be installed. You can unselect this if by chance you want to use this, but not install the agent. Maybe you have a break fix client, something like that you're helping out.
Mm-hmm.
Your local admin credentials, whatever those are going to be. This is what's going to be put on the machine at the time of deployment. So like when the deployment finishes, this is what the credentials are going to be, so you can get logged in. Now, if you have something set up in your RMM tool to change this, it can work perfectly fine. Just understand that it may change after the agent's been deployed.
Okay.
Deployment encryption, this is the password so that someone needs to use the deployment, they will need to put this password in to use it. So if by chance someone loses the deployment or the file or whatever, they won't have access to it unless they have the password.
Okay.
One-touch options here. We have one called Clean PC. This performs a Windows 10 reset with the remove user data option selected. This is there for removing essentially manufacturer bloat. Okay, so you could essentially, a lot of times if you have like Lenovo laptops, I believe it is, they have pre-installed items on the machine even prior to out of box.
Yeah.
So what this allows you to do is it does a Windows 10 reset with removes user data, blows out all the stuff that's pre-installed, and then runs through the out-of-box experience again and gets the actual agent installed, and all your stuff gets installed along with it.
Okay.
Wi-Fi settings. This one's a little caveat. This is useful in circumstances where you don't have a wired connection or you don't have a USB dongle of some sort. I do like to say, though, that be very careful with this one because the SSID can be tricky, especially because it's case sensitive within the out-of-box experience. The other thing is that this is for internet access during deployment, not after the fact and like that. This is for during deployment. So understand that if you set this up, know the out-of-box experience also is not the smartest because what ends up happening is it will not fail over to wired connections if wireless is not available. If you select Wi-Fi, you have to use Wi-Fi. You can't use either or. It's not smart enough to flip between the two.
Okay.
So I tend to recommend when in doubt, use wired if you can help it. After that, this point here, we are done. It is nice and finished. I can then go ahead and finish up and save it. In my case here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back out. And so in this case now, at this point, I can go ahead and download this provisioning package. And it is a Windows provisioning package. Okay, PPKG file. I place it on a USB thumb drive, and I can now add the out-of-box experience, stick it into the computer, and it will prompt. So let me show you. Just like so. It's going to come up asking you, hey, what would you like to do? Install a provisioning package. Now, nice thing about this is you can have a USB thumb drive with multiple different packages on it. Okay. If you do, like if you can have a thumb drive sitting there hanging at the workbench, and you can have 10, 20, whatever packages you want. What'll happen is once I hit continue, it's going to ask me to pick which package I want to use. Well, mine example only has one. So what's going to happen is it's going to go straight to asking me for the password. In this case, here's my provisioning package. Ask me for that password, package password. I hit OK. At this point, you will see at the top of the screen, you can remove your removable media now. At this point, I can remove the thumb drive. I'm done.
Okay.
I can walk away from that computer, move on to the next one. Take that thumb drive, slap it into the next computer, and it's going to keep working. Okay. And as you see, it just did a restart. It's now going into install, and it's going to keep running through the installation as we go in the background. It's going to probably reboot a few times, things like that. So that's the beauty of this for one touch. And that's the idea. You literally touch it once and you walk away. I mean, that's what we're going for. Plug USB stick in, get it going, go to the next one, you're good to go. All right. Any questions on one touch?
No, that makes sense to me.
Awesome. So like I said, one touch is using a Windows provisioning package. WebStart is there for your after the out-of-box experience, existing computers, existing clients that you're currently onboarding, things like that. Really, at its core, a WebStart deployment is a MSI file. Simply an MSI file that I'm going to be running on the computer.
Okay.
And pretty straightforward. Now, the reason why we call it WebStart is because the idea behind it is you're actually creating a web page. This web page here can be provided to the end user if you wish to. Now, this is really useful for, like, for example, remote users that you're bringing on board. They already have a device, or maybe they've already logged into it as it is. You could send them this website, which you can pre-tool. My image is a little small, so it kind of blows it up, with whatever messaging you want here, and then you take the PIN number that you create during this and put it in. At this point, it allows me to download the MSI file. Now, this MSI file is simply that. It is just now run it on the desktop. It installs the Windows service, easy deploy service like I was talking about, and it performs the deployment just like as if you were doing a one-touch using the configuration profile. It can do a computer rename also, which let me go into the settings here. We'll show this off a little bit. I could do a computer rename using a naming rule if I want. I can have it install the automate agent, whatever messaging I want, my vanity URL that I pick, my logo, all those things can be done however I see fit. Okay, so it makes it relatively easy to work with and set up web pages that you can provide to your end users, or you download the MSI and you put it on a thumb drive, and your technicians, when they're on site, can run it on the machines. At the same point, if you're getting a new computer set up and you already got remote access, you can just drop the MSI on there, run it on the machine, and it starts up and running.
Okay.
So the MSI can be utilized in multiple ways. And that kind of goes into a really good point to talk about is a lot of our clients have found other ways to utilize our deployment methods. I'm talking about the standard ways of using them. One of the things I'll mention real quick on the one touch, it's not technically a supported method, but it works great, is you can actually use a provisioning package from desktop. If you run a provisioning package on desktop with the clean PC option selected, it will run through a clean PC, which in this case, Windows 10 reset with user data, remove user data selected, and essentially restart the computer from scratch with your deployment. Now, there's a couple little finicky things with provisioning packages to learn about. I won't go into too much detail, but it is possible. What I'm trying to say is that there is other ways to use this. Think of it as a provisioning package that you can use, and think of it as a MSI file you can use. I even had some clients that have used their MSI file via group policy. Just biggest warning with that is make sure if you're going to use it as a group policy item, it's a run once, not a run every time the group policy hits, because that might be a problem if you do it that way. So haven't had anybody do that yet, but I still put that caveat and warning in there just in case.
Yeah.
Any questions on WebStart deployments?
I don't think so. That would be really good. We have a few different clients that have like an office that's local to us, but then they have
Mhm.
other offices that are very remote, and
There you
getting
go.
getting those workstations set up for the remote users is always a challenge. And if we could just direct them to a website, that would be a
Mhm.
lot easier.
Awesome. Yeah, and that's kind of the intention behind it is just like, hey, go to this website, download this file, run it. All right. I will give you a heads up. The only browser that we tend to have any finickiness with this one is Microsoft Edge.
Okay.
Smart Screen will sometimes pop up saying this is a suspicious file. It doesn't
Okay.
block it. It gives that warning message that you have to bypass.
Okay.
We are looking at actually making it so that when you go to the web page, it forewarns Edge users that this will happen. Now, we've done the whole process of all the, because there's a bunch of things you have to do in development
Mm-hmm.
to notify Microsoft of a installation file, and we've gone through that process. It used to be that it blocked our file. Now it
Mm-hmm.
just comes up with a warning. So we're still trying to, we've tried everything we could to get past that, but hopefully at some point they will finally allow us because nothing malicious actually happens. So
Yeah. Well, good luck getting Microsoft to do it.
that is very true. I will give you that fully admit that one with you. All right, custom installers. Let's go over this one here. This one's pretty straightforward. This allows me to run an MSI file or exe during a deployment. You would supply the file name, whatever arguments you want to put in. Can be different between MSI and exe. The cool thing with MSI is I have the ability to custom arguments here within the normal standard MSI exec arguments. I
Mm-hmm.
also have the ability to pass through MSI properties. So, like for
Mm.
example, if you have a software install that requires some sort of key or whatnot, you could pass
Oh
that
yeah.
via MSI property. Some of them can, as long as it's supported by the MSI file, of course.
Mm-hmm.
That can be really useful in if you need to create a custom client specific installation, for example. AV
Mm-hmm.
software for a lot of cases may have something like that. At the
Yeah.
same time, the EXEs, you do have the normal whatever slash whatever it is for the EXE you can put in if you need to. You will then supply a direct download URL. You can use a plethora of options here. This could be self-hosted, this could be a cloud-hosted solution, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of options you can utilize here, but as long as it validates the download, perfectly fine, no issues. If you're self-hosting and if you want to use some type of authentication, we do have basic authentication pass-throughs that you can put in here. Just understand that this is the only type of credential information that's really stored on our site is this, and then with the OneTouch deployments. So we do
Okay.
recommend that you use something that is not, of course, going to be accessible to anything else.
Right. Yeah.
And then timeout if you need to, and so forth and so on. And that's just going to run during, now this is going to be executed by the Windows service that we have there during the
Mm-hmm.
deployment. Simple as that. Runs usually relatively well, and I haven't had any people that have problems with this. Now, the nice thing is this is also a way that we can install other RMM agents if by chance we have a client that comes in with a different agent they need to use or some type of other thing, product they use. PowerShell scripts, this is where we can run PowerShell. Pretty straightforward. Now, my example one is just a Chrome install that grabs Chrome installer and then performs the installation, but you can use a plethora of different types of Chrome installs or different types of PowerShell scripts. Now, we do no validation on the script, just kind of keep that in mind. So we do recommend testing prior to.
Okay.
The nice thing about this is with this install is it's pretty straightforward. Now, I do want to mention that if you ever do end up try to use a PowerShell script, I do recommend that you utilize something that can run as local system account because we are running this as a service. Okay, so if the service is running as local system account, so if you use something that's a user specific, like for example, UNC path, if you don't have the
Mm-hmm.
UNC set path set to anonymous, it won't run properly. Now, we tend to once again recommend that you have some type of repository files if you're going to use this, as it makes it relatively easy to run through.
Okay.
Otherwise, you do have the ability to set up multiple logins and user accounts. And
Okay.
within those user accounts, you can select giving someone user management access. So, like for example, if you want to delegate someone creating other users, you can do so. In the future, we do plan on having additional permissions. We are currently working on a new authentication method utilizing what's called Auth0, which is then going to allow us to do a lot more when it comes to permissions. But really, what the big goal is the ability to integrate within Azure and Azure AD and Intune and things like that.
Okay.
So we're doing that's actually something we're working on wrapping up, and kind of looking forward to seeing where we go with that. Last but not least, in the settings section, you have the ability to do automate, manage, and Teams integration. Automate and
Okay.
manage is pretty self-explanatory. I'll go to manage real quick and show you. If I go back to this home screen, if I have finished a deployment, I can take a ticket number, type in said ticket number,
Mm-hmm.
and it will send the details, the profile items, the Windows updates, profile settings, all to that particular ticket.
Oh, that's handy.
So that's really useful if you've got a technician that's doing 5 deployments, he can at least push the data through to the ticket. So you have all 5 deployments confirmed and what is done and what's not done. Because just in case, I mean, of course, if something by chance, if an automate script fails, things like that, you'll know if it failed or not via the profile items list here, you'll see. The other ones we have in there is the Teams integration. The Teams integration allows you to create a webhook off of a Teams channel. And then you can put that webhook into this right here, and it will send either completes or starts and completes notifications to that channel. This is
Okay.
really useful if you want to have, like, for example, technicians working on a workbench. He doesn't need to sit there and babysit the 10 computers, come back to the desk, continue working, watch the channel. Oh, those computers are done. I can go wrap it up or do whatever preliminary stuff you have to do after the deployment's run.
Okay, that's handy too.
This is pretty neat because with the deployment, with the completes notifications, what happens is you actually click on the link and it'll bring you right to the details screen of the item too, which is kind of cool.
Okay.
And that's kind of the gist of it. Any other questions at all?
Can I see the configuration profiles menu again?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so all right, that and then you can nest them. So like
Mm-hmm.
base profile will install on everything, and
Mm-hmm.
then you can have create client specific ones that will
Mm-hmm.
install certain software.
You can even go even further if you want, because you can nest several times. I could have a base profile to a client specific profile to then a department specific profile.
Okay.
So you can nest several times. Just, I mean, it's one of those cases of whatever your needs are. Now, I know
Okay.
some clients that like to create one profile and they have a couple profiles and they have a couple situations they use them in, and that's it. Then they do further items manually. We tend to try to push away from like doing things manually if you can help it. That's why like
Mm-hmm.
I point out like doing a client specific one and then you have your base. So the nice thing is you don't have to maintain you maintain your base profile, which is probably the majority of what you're doing. And then what you do is you have your client specific stuff that is more case by case basis.
Okay. Then I think you mentioned this, but I just want to make sure that I get it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have an install, say like QuickBooks, that needs a license key,
Mm-hmm.
where can we put that in?
So in this case, is it a license key with an actual file structure, or is it a
Yeah,
license key that I can pass with credential or pass within the actual argument of installation?
yeah, it would actually be in the argument.
So that would be where you would come in with like a custom installer.
Okay.
All right. So you would utilize the custom installer and set up whatever arguments you need to pass those keys through. Now, I do know that some licensing specific software or licensed software can be really tricky because, of
Mm-hmm.
course, they have to be silent installers if it's going to
Uh,
work. So, and I think QuickBooks at this point does have the ability to do silent install now, and I've
mm-hmm.
seen some people utilizing it in that capacity. But that's like, for example, I could create QuickBooks Client A,
Mm-hmm.
and then maybe because they have their own license key that they've supplied to you to use for it. And then I can use, like, for example, if I'm using MSI, I select custom arguments here, and now I can add on, like, maybe it's a slash something else in there that I have to add in, or maybe it's a key equals something that I got to put in here. That's where
Okay.
you're going to have to look at QuickBooks is like probably enterprise installations or corporate installation processes and see if
Mm-hmm.
there's some type of documentation arguments for there. So,
Okay. Yeah, we have a few different accountant clients that have
mhm,
like for their new workstations they need like 7 years worth of QuickBooks installed, and that takes forever.
yeah. No, I
Uh,
understand. That's one of the tricky ones. I mean, the downside with QuickBooks and things like that is that that does those are probably the biggest hindrance for automation of deployments that you're going to run into,
mm-hmm.
because it tends to be like those kind of things. It makes it hard to deploy them in an automated fashion, but you can always attempt to do so. And
Mm-hmm.
you might have, like, that might be your one-off situations where you have to do something extra.
Okay.
So,
And
but I
what
mean,
about,
oh, go
oh,
ahead. Sorry.
sorry. What about software where you actually have a file, like a .lic file that you use for the license?
A lot of cases we tend to recommend utilizing PowerShell for those because you can actually have custom, like, in that case, multiple downloads can happen within the PowerShell script. You can
Okay.
download the file, download the installation file, download the executable, and then run through. Another
Okay.
option is the case of you can technically use a self-extracting installer that is wrapped with the license file, and
Okay.
then have whatever executable you're calling, because if it's a self-extracting installer, it has the license file, it has the executable, and it's going to run it based on how you set up the self-extracting installer. Those are two
Okay.
options right there for that. PowerShell tends to be the more powerful feature for something like that, especially since you can set up arguments, you can set up calling files, you can set up all kinds of things within PowerShell. Um, it just makes it understand, you have the understanding of PowerShell itself.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I'm thinking. Um,
No, no problem.
do you have? Is there a? Or would we be able to get a trial
Mm-hmm.
to actually test this out?
Of course. So let me go over a little bit more. I'm actually going to log out of here real quick because this
Okay.
interacts with my sign up page a little bit.
Okay.
Refresh the screen. So we have a 30-day free trial
Okay.
with whatever package you decide to choose from. When you go into the pricing section here, I'm going to touch base on this. And we have starter, professional, premier, and fully managed. So starter is just as it sounds. It's kind of there for our smaller shops, people that want to just kind of get started with the product. They don't really have that many deployments because it limits them to 15 deployments per month. We
Mm-hmm.
do have the ability to extend this and things like that if necessary, but in most cases, we say, well, if you find yourself going over, we can bump you up to professional for a bit and always bring you back down. Professionals, where you get unlimited deployments, and then Premiere is where you get the PowerShell scripting feature and then extended support and training. PowerShell is, like I said, a pretty big feature of the product. And the extended support and training, this is where, like, I, for example, could sit down with your team and teach your entire team how to utilize the product, the actual end users of it. I've had a client where I think we had 10 people of their team. I did a webinar for them, or kind of, it was actually as a Zoom call that I did with them. And I did a full training session while they had lunch, got their lunch and learn for them. So I did the training for
Okay.
them on the product. Um, Extended supports where we'll actually get in there with you and try to actually pull the information we need and diagnose it and do a little more in-depth support rather than having you get all the information for us. We can get in there with you and make a longer call to actually work on it, more details necessary. And
Okay.
then lastly, our fully managed option, this tends to be a scoped out service. In the case of, we'll see what your needs are, what the needs of the clients are, what you want us to be able to do for you, how managed you want it to be. Are we creating essentially everything for you, or are we just there to help you with PowerShell scripting when you need it? That kind of stuff. So that's where fully managed comes in, and we scope those out separately.
Okay.
Like I said, for the trial, it is 30 days, and you can go in and cancel at any time.
Okay.
And what we'll do is we'll end it so at the end of the service there, you will find that we have the 3 different packages available. Sign up, go through here. It'll ask you for a credit card. Once you go through the credit card process, it essentially unlocks and you have full access to the product at that point forward.
Okay.
My suggestion to you is if you're going to do a trial, do Premiere so you can test all the features out. And you can always request, hey, we're not going to use Premiere, knock us back to Professional Starter. We could do that before it actually kicks in.
Okay.
Other
All
than
right.
that, one other thing I will mention to you real quick. Just realized I forgot to show it off during the actual. I want to show you the link for documentation.
Okay.
Up here on the right-hand corner, there is a link for documentation that brings you into our doc site right here. We have quite a bit of information on how to get started with the product with our quick start guide.
Okay.
Our full portal overview. This goes over every single detail of how essentially the product works, like how to use a one-touch profile. What are the details of it? We're pretty detailed in our documentation, and I also have a few getting started videos and how to work with certain sections of the product. Plan is down the road we're gonna have more videos as we go along. There is
Okay.
some additional information here for Automate. And I will point out also within Automate, we do have an Automate script here. Join PC domain. This will, if it's a static domain, not a Azure AD, for example, it allows you to have the computer join a domain during the deployment too.
Okay.
That's a script that's specific for Automate though. Beyond that, that's pretty much it. Any last question for a wrap up?
No, I think that's it. Yeah, so thank you for showing me all that,
No problem.
and I will definitely take a look at it.
Awesome. Well, if you need anything else during the time, don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can reach us at help@msptoolshed.com. And if you've gotten this far in the recorded demo, we do really appreciate you stopping by. And if you've got any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at the address I mentioned, help@msptoolshed.com. Check out our website, check out our social links, and be more than happy to reach out to you and give you more information on our product. Once again, thank you from those of us at MSP Toolshed, and have a good rest of your day.